welcome to Journey. What tools and techniques and even strategies have you found help enhance your journey and affect change? Join me and Marilyn Schoeman Dow, a creative strategist, as we're going to look at changing the color of your journey. Marilyn, it's a delight to have you sitting here so greenly with me. And we've titled the show Green Light Thinking. But first, let's meet you. Who are you? What gave you an idea of coming up with this kind of green way of living on your journey?
Well, it's been a long journey of self-discovery, and one of the things that I have found is that probably like most people, I wonder, why did it take me so long to learn these things? And how many times...
I'm glad to hear that. There's so many people sit here and say the same thing. Right?
How many times do I need to have this experience before I get the lesson?
Exactly.
And I grew up on a farm in the Midwest, and I very much enjoyed that. And one of the things that I learned, not that I was taught necessarily, but that I learned, was that I wasn't going to do anything significant, so I didn't need to pay a whole lot of attention to what I did with my life. And I didn't realize that I had learned that message until I was about 40. And that was the beginning of taking a very different pathway.
I've found that to be so true of a lot of people, and whatever tag we might want to call it, midlife crisis, I choose to call it waking up to the fact there's a lot more to life than perhaps, just going to work every day and then switching on TV at night and zoning out. So at a mature age, you came to that realization. No, we never will be, and we never want to be. But what led you to, you've had articles written about you, you've developed a program that's used in companies. How did you get going on this?
Well, I was in a position where I was responsible for teaching people how to be good problem solvers, and I couldn't find the kind of tools I wanted. And so I very naively started creating one.
Don't we all have to create? What do they say about creativity?
Well, I began collecting words that did something for me in terms of stimulating my thinking. And so I spent a long time, actually well over a year, just gathering terms. And then I had all these wonderful words, but you can't just give a person a list of words and have it mean anything. And so then I had to create some kind of a form to put it in. And I would use it in workshops, and people would really surprise themselves with how quickly they could come up with ideas. And that was very gratifying for me. And the people's response to the tool is what kept me going. If they hadn't responded, I would have quit, not happily, but I would have quit. But when I would keep getting stuck, it would be people's positive response that would keep motivating me. And so this process that I didn't really understand I was beginning eventually got into I put it into form of a chart. And as soon as I could put that structure to it, it was like, wow, there's a big aha for me.
Something for you, too. And we'll look at this. This is your first chart, Idea Generator. I like the name of that even. Your aha chart, right?
There you go. And so the key idea is that everybody has the ability to think creatively, but lots of times we don't realize it, lots of times we don't use it. And so it's almost like being able to read and not reading. If we're able to think and don't, we still don't get the benefit of it. But in one situation, a person in a company was working with this, and they had a challenge to get rid of the cellulose dust when they were manufacturing disposable diapers. And that's not a field that I know anything about, but I could go through the chart and pick out terms that would make them think of other possibilities. Like I stopped at the term rearrange, and that made me think, well, could you rearrange the steps in the manufacturing process so you don't produce as much cellulose dust? And they said, well, if it's what we really want to do is to sell it, which is a totally different kind of problem.
Another byproduct, but utilize it somehow.
Right. And very often, the biggest part of creativity is figuring out what is the real problem to solve as opposed to just dealing with symptoms. And So the next term that seemed significant to me was liquefy, and I asked, how could you add water and wash it away by some kind of a sieve system? And they said, well, if it's wet, it's no longer marketable. So I just kept getting more information and asking more terms. And then I came to make electrically charged, and that made me think, well, could you electrically charge the particles of cellulose dust and then use the magnetic force to draw it off?
Oh,
and
sounds very creative
instantly
thinking.
the engineer was excited about it. It was quick, it was clean, ecologically sound, and so on. And it was really less than 5 minutes to get to that solution. But they'd been working on it with lots of experts for a while. And sometimes our expertise gets in the way of our vision of things.
Oh, I found that to
know
be
it's not
true.
possible.
I've been in what we would call brainstorming sessions. You know, let's get a group of people together and kick around ideas. But this sounds a little bit more focused with some very key words that act as triggers. Would you say that being able to come up with some of the words that maybe, what do they go to the right side of our brain where we're more creative than the left side where we're more logical and rational?
Well, one of the things that it does is give your brain a question, and your brain wants to answer. If we just have stuff out there, it doesn't necessarily get hooked. But if we give our minds an answer, or question, it really wants to come up with an answer, and so it begins to process. And if you can just imagine taking a huge deck of cards and somebody says, okay, here's a question, and flipping through that all the way fast forward, it would be like your brain, I think, functions just running through all kinds of possibilities. And our brains love to do that. We just don't necessarily give it the opportunity that much.
We love that aha moment. We really do. And, you know, when that happens, rarely, you know, we would like for it obviously to happen more often.
Well, and we can make it happen more often. I think that's one of the key things for us to keep in mind, that it's not just a few people who can do it, and it's not just in certain circumstances, but that we can do that very often, quite literally on demand. That's not to say that you'll get the great aha, the great solution to the world's problem just by sitting down and asking these questions, but many, many, many situations we can do that with.
Have you seen people turn around their thinking attitude, you know, change the way that they think through this process?
I have seen that not only where people have made that discovery for themselves, but I have watched other people be stunned by an idea that someone else could come up with that they didn't realize had an ability to be a creative thinker, particularly because maybe that wasn't their job role. And so we put them in this little box that says,
stereotype people too much.
Sure,
we all do that.
Sure.
And ourselves, too. I think we label ourselves right away.
In fact, of course, as I'm sure you know, there are people who don't put any title on their business cards because they don't want to be put in boxes. They'll tell you the different kinds of things that they want you to know about them so that you don't limit the way that you see them.
Now, I want to briefly, to touch on something that you shared with me, in that, you know, you said you grew up in the Midwest. Never assumed as you were growing up that you wanted to have a role public speaking. Was that a difficult move for you to move into? Was it a challenge?
That's one way to put it. I almost didn't graduate with my first degree because of putting off Fundamentals of Speech 101. I was terrified of it.
I remember that. I was too.
And I went to my speech teacher the first day of class. I put it off till I was second semester senior. And I went to the instructor and I said, I need to tell you this. I'm terrified of this. I tried everything I could to get out of it, and I can't get out of it. So this is between me and graduation. And the instructor just said, well, you know, everybody says that. And then I gave my first speech, and she called me in and said, well, you're just like a scared little rabbit up there, aren't you? I said, yes,
I really
am.
I was not lying to you, right?
You don't hold the papers, you have to put them down.
I did worse, I fainted. I did much worse, but I got over it.
I'm sure.
I want to show a clip you're going to share with us, because you do get out now in audiences, and you know, you can tell you have this vivacious ability to do that, but it didn't come easy, did it?
It came
We might want to show
very
the clip
hard.
and we can keep talking about how you've managed this skill.
Well, number one, I worked very hard to avoid it. I finished that class and I figured I will never do this again. And I was counting on that. And then about 12 years later, I got into a job situation where I had to do a little, and I wanted the job so much that I decided, okay, I can stand this. And I worked out a trade with someone. I said, I'll write your reports if you do my speeches. And that worked well for about 2 weeks.
You bartered your way into that, or tried to, huh?
Oh, it was very naive. But then I had the choice of continuing to humiliate myself publicly, or to resign, or to get better. And so I just decided I would really work at that. And I did, and it was agony. And for some of my audiences, it was agony too.
We do want to show what you managed to do with it now and how you managed to come out of that. And here you are. So you would like to briefly explain what this is?
This is
You know,
thinking, and
there are people like you that always make the best things happen, no matter what. So what is it? What makes the difference between two equally skilled people when one of them has a dramatic level of success and the other has a very low level of success? Well,
Okay, I think that certainly showed that you had an exuberant way of presenting to your audience, as you are now, too. But once again, we're talking process here. We're talking process with your ideas and steps along the way. And you've already mentioned sometimes you had to rely on just the people's input, feedback to motivate you to take the next step.
Yes, because frankly, I got a degree in teaching. I thought I would teach until I was 65 and then move right into the retirement home. And I just thought that's the way it works. I didn't wonder what other options are there. And as I look back on that, I think, oh my word, how could that be? I didn't wonder about that. But it wasn't something that people would necessarily be early on exploring options like people do now. And also at the time I thought, I really wish that people had given me ideas about what my options were and what my abilities were and how I might overcome some of my challenges and so on. And for a little while, I had my own private little pity party. And then I realized, my goodness, nobody has that for the most part. It's really unusual if you have someone who is really like a mentor to you and says, these are some things I see are possibilities for you, and here are some things to explore, and read this book and meet this person and take this course. But one of the things that I can look back on, I didn't see it at the time, but I can look back on it and realize that I've always had an interest in wanting to know how things work and being very curious. And my parents really instilled that, I think, in all four of us. I have 3 brothers. And living on the farm gives you lots of opportunity for that, too. In fact, I still go home every summer and sleep in that same old bed and look out at those same old cornfields. But it is very often a case that we don't take ourselves seriously enough to really pay attention to who we are until we're down the road a long ways.
That is so often true, and I've had several people sitting in that same chair coming up with some pretty major life-changing directions along their path and how they decided to make a decision. And it was a personal decision, and yet it ended up being, most often, like with yourself, something that led to sharing for others, helping them too. Come on, let's get to a solution of this problem, and let's do it in a fun way. And I want to bring that up too, because all the things you've done, such colorful things. You're talking about green light, and the flashy green. And I know the color green, for one, is a good imaging color for going, positive. At the same time, is there a certain fun aspect that is needed, do you think, to get those creative juices going? Should it be a little bit joyful?
A little bit joyful. That's always preferable. You'll have some people that think, thou shalt not have fun at work.
Exactly.
But for the most
right.
part, for the most part, the more fun you can have to a limited degree, the more successful you'll be, the more creative you will be, the more breakthroughs you will get, the better your relationships are with your colleagues, the better your teamwork is. And I found as people were working with this, that was very gratifying to me. I had mentioned earlier that I was 40 before I learned I could think. And for me, that was saying, okay, if you think, you matter. Now, if you matter, you need to pay attention to what you're doing with your life and set some goals, which was a very insightful change of thinking. And so when I first created this idea generator chart, it worked very well with some people, but it didn't work well with other people. And so I was trying to find out, well, what's another way to approach them? And so that led me to the idea activator. And so I put it on cards, and it's got color, and there's only a small piece at a time. And people can interact with it.
It satisfies those business people with their Rolodex thing,
Yes.
right, doesn't it? And it satisfies those touchy-feely people that want something tangible,
sure,
right?
Sure. And also, it was much easier for people to find ways to use individual terms. For some people, when they saw the whole chart, that was too much. Other
Yeah,
people,
I
they
can
look
see
at the
that.
chart and they love it because they just scan it. I still keep mine right over my desk, and I use it almost every day. But
What
there
you're
were two
saying is
styles.
the
Go ahead.
styles are different for everybody then.
Yes.
So you kind of started tailoring what you were doing to help meet those needs.
And what I also found, and it's certainly no surprise, but anything that you read about creative thinking and problem solving and breakthroughs emphasizes the importance of how people get along and how they interact. And wanting to create a positive environment is what led me into the green light thinking strategy. And as soon as, I worked on this a long time, I could make it complex, and then I had to work on it a long time to get it to be simple enough to be really useful. And so the green light thinking idea is a very specific mindset in which you figure out, what do you need to do to make things work here? And the example, the definition that I give is like, the green lighters are going through life with their mental foot on the accelerator, and they're always moving forward, and they come to a boulder in the road, and they'll figure out a way around it. And they may not be always going forward, but they're always in motion, they're always moving. But the red lighter has their mental foot on the brake, and maybe their hand on the emergency brake too.
Right.
And they come to a stop, and they're stuck. And so the difference between how a green lighter operates versus a red lighter is the difference between something as basic as how you ask a question. If you need somebody's help, let's say you're checking into the hotel and your room isn't quite right or whatever, and the red lighter will say, well, can we do this? And that's a yes-no question, and the odds are you're going to get a no answer. But the green lighter will say, how can we do this?
Right,
And
which
so-
automatically says, of course we can do
That's
this.
right. It moves you right into the
Into
how-to, and it makes you skip over the permission statement,
Exactly.
the decision
Right.
to take this action. And so the green lighter focuses on what is the objective, and they just keep moving toward it. And the red lighter is so focused on the obstacle that they're forever getting stuck. And so green lighters figure out the right kinds of ways of asking the questions, the kind of action to take, and they go seek out other green lighters.
To help
if
them
you're
do
if
that.
you're checking into the
Exactly.
airport and you see that
Yeah.
you might have a problem getting on board, and there are two people, two agents at the counter, you see which one is the greener one, and you put your green light question to them, and the odds are greatly enhanced that you will achieve what you were choosing to.
Did you find, though, as you said, sometimes it felt complicated and you had to try and get it to more of a simpler version, the simplicity even of idea generating and green light thinking might almost put some people off, because we actually want to do things the hard way, don't we?
It's actually a real paradox, because when I first created these tools, when I got to creating the instructions for them, I could write very lengthy, very complicated, or not necessarily complicated, but very lengthy directions that would have lots and lots and lots of options. But because people weren't necessarily so used to thinking that way, it would cause them to be apprehensive and create a barrier for them. And so I needed to simplify, 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 so that they would believe at the beginning they could do this very well. And with the green light thinking, I had those processes and those concepts And I worked with them a long time in workshops before I finally came up with the idea of, oh, red light, green light. And as
So
soon as I
simple.
did
Yeah, it's
that,
really-
then people could pick it up much more quickly. And actually, even if they never get into a session or they never read the book, they will get a sense of what it is you're talking about. And
Would you encourage people to use more green, even in their decor at work or at home, just to enhance that thinking or to encourage that kind of thinking?
oh, I love that thought. Well, I think
I
you ought
bet
to
you do.
handle anything you possibly can
There we
with
go,
green.
right.
Green is the only way to go.
I've also learned that green it represents abundance.
Well, and for the most part, people do have very pleasant, positive associations with green. And as you are looking at the kinds of things to do with green, I give people in presentations, I give them this little item, and they have it for a while before we use it. But when I give it to them, at the end, I make a reference to, this is actually the most valuable coin you will ever have in your life. It lives in your change. And every time you take your change out, then you'll see this green light reminder.
Right,
And so you'll be thinking about how green is my thinking, what action do I need to take here. And now people will start meetings and they'll put the green coins on the table so that people will go
Just a
ahead
reminder, just a little subtle.
it's a way of saying we're not here to criticize, we're not here to point fingers or blame or whatever. We're here to say, how can we make this better? How can we improve this? Or in a family situation, I mean, it works everywhere.
It
And
sounds like it's good for avoiding conflict.
it
It
minimizes
sets the tone,
conflict.
you know, the green aspect of we're going to work this, not we're going to argue about it.
And it also makes it very clear that red light behavior includes things like being a critic, being argumentative, putting people down, being very critical. And so we just say those are not acceptable behaviors. They're counterproductive. And so when you say we want to green light this, if you go ahead and do red light behavior, then I know and you know and everybody knows you know it's red light and you consciously choose to do that. So the negative peer pressure works very strongly.
I would imagine,
And so the red light behaviors tend to disappear. I've had people talk to me about managers that would catch themselves, very red light managers that would catch themselves in the middle of a red light phrase and stop and say, oh, I got to green this and rephrase it. But we also have a signal of a tap on the table if somebody's reading it, so that's an easy tool to use in a discussion too. But the energy level and the motivation and the thinking and the enthusiasm that grows when they know they have a green light environment is really dramatic. It makes a tremendous difference.
But not only in a work environment, which it's you know certainly going to have its value, but you already mentioned discussions around the dinner table with the kids and green light,
Spouses.
you know, exactly,
Sure.
right, avoiding those traps that we fall into and those conflicting statements, you know, which are red statements, aren't they?
Well, they are, and actually one of the biggest challenges is to be green when we think about ourselves.
Oh, I bet.
It's so easy for us to be so self-critical. Green to everybody else and red to ourselves.
No.
And actually, I think our natural style is red. So the challenge is to hold our tongue for long enough for our mind to shift into green, and
Well, this
we can
falls
keep
in
getting better
line
at it.
with our own looking at ourselves in an affirming way. And I've started, and you mentioned these are green light thinking affirmation kind of tools and techniques to use. Now, just like when you say hold your tongue, I hold that thought. I hold the thought until it forms correctly before I release it. So now I'll actually kind of capture the thought, and people may think she's really slow, you know, sometimes, but no, I'm actually forming
Processing.
my thoughts better, getting rid of the negative aspects of even my thought process, and certainly I do attempt to do it before I insert get the mouth in gear.
Well, and that's a good idea for a lot of reasons, not only because you will have a better formed thought, but in that better forming of it, because it's a better idea, you are more likely to get that first response to be positive. And first responses are crucial. They often set the tone, as you know, for how people will buy into or not buy into that concept.
How would you say this falls in line, too, with some of our new way of thinking, of being really present and in the moment? You know, green light
it really
thinking
helps you do that.
It does, doesn't it? Isn't it a
because you
tremendous
have to be
focus?
engaged.
Exactly, right.
You can't just sleepwalk through a situation and go green, because it does require thought. But I have to tell you that for me, green light thinking has become a game. It's a question for me, how well can I play this? Here are my obstacles. I was traveling with a friend in Spain, and the person that we were supposed to be meeting and staying at her home, she'd given us the only directions were to go to Casa Mimi, and everybody in Alicante, Spain is supposed to know Casa Mimi. Well, they didn't. And we had to get very creative, and my friend was very frustrated, and I just found it, well, that didn't work, so now what do we try?
This is a creative challenge we have.
And I better be able to play this game well enough to win it, to solve this problem. And when I think that way, of course, I think better.
You think better.
When
and
I view it as a challenge, I am more successful.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing what you've done on your own personal journey so far and changing the way you think. And we're going to do another segment and talk about a little bit more game playing and brain on fast forward.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Appreciate the time you spent with us.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we will do another show, and we're going to play a game with it. So in the meantime, think green and enjoy your journey.